So I want to debunk a longstanding myth about overcoming your trauma, letting go of the past, integrating your healing, blah, 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 blah. A lot of people believe, and it's mostly because we are told this by practitioners in Western medicine and even modern day psychology, that you have to go into the past and you have to unpack your shit and process what happened to you. And that's truthfully not the case. You actually don't need to do that in order to start the process of healing and to start feeling relief in the here and now. And so this long-standing myth has actually done a lot of damage in the sense that it has deterred people from embarking upon a healing journey, because most people that have trauma are very intimidated by the idea of going back into their past and having to either relive the experience or talk and process some of the things that happened to them. And for many, there's the other piece that a lot of times when trauma occurs, over time we block that shit out as a maladaptive behavior. So when it comes time to process your past or the experiences, oftentimes people are left feeling like they don't know where to go or where to start because they lack the memories necessary to put the pieces together. So I want to tell you, for anybody out there who has been intimidated either by therapy, coaching, trauma work, or just any sort of self-help adventure, we'll call it an adventure, I want you to know that you actually don't need to do that in order to begin or initialize these steps toward healing. In fact, what oftentimes happens is when we go back into the past and we are not mentally and emotionally prepared to do so or physiologically equipped to do so, a couple things oftentimes happen. A, we can really re-traumatize the person that we're working with, which becomes an ethical issue. And then number two, like I mentioned, you may not have the biological landscape or the corrected physiological responses in order to cope and navigate with some of that psychological impact or ramifications of going into the past and bringing up shit. So you don't have to do that. And I just want to, strike that from the record in terms of thinking that that's what you have to do to start getting better. What I do want to talk to you about is a program that I offered called Life Camp. And for many of you that follow me, I'm sure you've seen posts about it and you've seen me talk about it before. I want to tell you what it is, why it's highly effective, and why you can get really dramatic results in a really short amount of time. So, brief synopsis. I am a licensed clinical social worker, psychotherapist, and I'm also a personal coach. And I have a really extensive experience in my career of working with all different types of folks and a lot of different communities really around the world. I'm from New York, and while I was in New York early on in my career, I had the opportunity to work in a variety of settings, anywhere from resettling refugees and asylees through the International Rescue Committee. I worked at Planned Parenthood. I worked in after-school settings. I've worked in harm reduction and needle exchanges, in corrections in the prison system. And I've also worked in great vast with the homeless population and also with sex workers and those who have been trafficked internationally. In addition to that, throughout my social work career, I've moved into, again, working primarily in addictions now and in treatment facilities and having multiple county contracts in my local community, both with public education and CPS. So that's my social work career in a nutshell. And it has lent itself for me to really have an opportunity to work with a lot of different types of people from all walks of life. Alongside my social work career, I also opened a private practice many moons ago. And there, I had the opportunity to work with a lot of different types of people as well. CEOs of big corporations, nonprofits, executives, law firms, so on and so forth. So between my social work career and my private practice, I've had the privilege of really being able to study human behavior across the board with a lot of different types of people. And what was most interesting about my career that I discovered is that regardless of socioeconomic background, regardless of gender, race, religious orientation, anything along the lines in the fact that brings out diversity, I realized that at the end of the day, everyone really struggles with the same shit. And this was crazy to me because as a social worker, I'm really invested in ensuring that I honor people's individual stories and their personal narratives, and really allowing inclusivity to exist around these personal narratives. But what I will say is that, again, regardless of who I worked with, what I realized is that, again, everyone is struggling with the same shit. And what that same shit is ultimately trauma. And so everyone's story might be independently different. For example, you might have suffered from, growing up in a violent home. Maybe you're divorced parents at age 4. Maybe it was migrating from, South America to the United States when you were young. Maybe it was a breakup. Maybe it was a chronic illness. Maybe it is racism or homophobia, being subjected to something like that. Trauma takes on a lot of different forms. We know this. Adversity, toxic stress, it really does. There's endless ways in which it can show up in the human condition. But what I know to be true is this, is that it lands in the body and in the mind in the same way across the board, universally for all humans. And so there's 3 major themes that I discovered in my career that no matter who I worked with, these were the 3 things that showed up with everyone universally. And this was wild to me because it was an unexpected finding, and it really initiated these first steps in me pursuing a career in trauma and really stepping away from the idea of overdiagnosing and overpathologizing people for coming in and having quote unquote symptoms. What we know to be true is that trauma manifests in the mind and the body in all sorts of ways. And I really started to get a deeper understanding of this as I studied humans over the past decade. What I found were these 3 themes. Number 1, every person I've ever worked with across the board has struggled with crippling insecurity, low self-esteem, a lack of self-worth, and poor confidence, and a perceived sense of rejection, either from their community, their family, or their peers at some point in their lives. So meaning a complete lack of belonging to who they are in the world and their relationship to others. So that brings up all sorts of feelings of rejection and the quote unquote not enough story. So whether I'm not successful enough, smart enough, pretty enough, good enough, whatever, the I'm not enough, ... So everyone that I've ever worked with struggles with this. And this usually manifests, as you know, in, insidious negative self-talk, thoughts that you can't seem to get out, and, intrusive thinking, obsessive compulsive, and just that overwhelming feeling of not being enough in the world and not feeling deserving for the things that are around you. So that's number 1. The second theme, okay, which works in tandem with this first pillar that I just talked about, is everybody that I've ever worked with who's got this first component going on as a result of trauma also struggles with relationship drama in some way, shape, or form. So it could be intimate partner, it could be parent-child, it could be work relationships. So this takes the place of codependency, toxic dynamics, feeling taken advantage of chronically or walked all over, really poor boundaries, also having that level of either avoidant dynamics or very clingy, having overall an overwhelming sense of anxiety when it comes to intimacy, perhaps avoiding confrontation at all costs, which in turn results in a lot of other drama. So by and large, again, this can take a lot of different forms, but everyone I've ever worked with who struggles with this first component also struggles with this second component because they tend to work in tandem with one another, like I just mentioned. Then lastly, what I also discovered was this third theme, and that is everyone who's got these first 2 themes going on also has this: a lack of clarity and direction in the way in which they want to show up in the world and truly authenticate their story. Meaning, really, really struggling to live fully, live boldly, and also have some sort of clear vision as to how they want to offer their gifts into the world. And so oftentimes this exists because when you've got those first 2 things going on, the low self-esteem, the insecurities, blah, 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 and all this relationship drama, you are distracted as fuck from your own personal purpose and living a meaningful life. And so the challenge with that is that everyone, I believe, innately deep down wants to show up in this world in some way, shape, or form, wants to have an impact, wants to leave their footprint on the earth, wants to maybe carve out a legacy for themselves. And they can do this in a really big and loud way. In some ways, maybe it's very quiet. But nevertheless, everybody wants to go through this life saying that they lived fully and they lived to their potential. And when you recognize at some point in your life that you're not doing that, that feeling fucking sucks, because ultimately what happens is you're standing here with this awareness of who you are, and then you also have deep desires and awareness of who you want to be over here. And so what happens is you get stuck in the space or the dissonance between where you are now and where you want to be. And in this space, that shit is a horrible, overwhelming feeling. And it oftentimes breeds feelings such as anxiety, overwhelm, apathy, depression. The list goes on and on. So when we're not living fully, when we don't have a clear sense of how we want to be in the world, and when we don't feel confident enough to authentically showcase ourselves to the world, we often feel like we're living a less than life, and we lack meaning and we lack purpose. And for the human experience, that oftentimes is incredibly dissatisfying. So just to sum up, we have these three major themes, all stemming from trauma, right? So this origin, people come into my office all the time with diagnosis, with addiction issues, the list goes on. But ultimately, what I've come to discover is that the symptoms that are being presented or the challenges that are being presented, we can put a label on them as a diagnosis, or a mood disorder. But ultimately, by and large, the mass majority of humans that I work with and that I have worked with are struggling with the symptomatic response of having some level of adversity and trauma in their lives. And so when that happens, they have these three themes: the insecurity, the low self-esteem, the relationship drama, and the lack of clarity around their purpose and mission in this life. So with that, I discovered a way to kind of tie all these themes together, join forces with my colleague and my very dear friend, Ruby Christine, and create a curriculum and a program called Life Camp. This program takes a two-prong approach because I just explained to you the three major themes that are going on with most people that I work with. In addition to that, what oftentimes happens, not even oftentimes, 99.9% of the time, is that individuals who have a history of trauma and adversity, they have all these themes and these symptoms showing up, they also have an overactive fight or flight response, meaning they literally have physiology and neurobiology that is wired within them to reinforce these negative habits and these thinking, and they ultimately get wired for drama over the course of their lifetime. This is why creating new habits feels next to impossible, or letting go of the past, memories, dynamics, confrontations, situations, whatever. Although there might be an awareness to do so and an inspiration to do so, and even maybe some willpower at play, ultimately, it's a lot of 2 steps forward, 5 steps back when it comes to this, because it's not just the conscious mind that needs support when it comes to creating new habits and creating a new path for yourself or a healing journey. You actually need to tie in the aspect of getting your biology on board to work for you instead of against you. Most people that have adversity and trauma actually have this overactive fight or flight, which means they have physiology and a biological landscape that is working against them. And so part of what we created in this program was a 2-prong approach. We feed you dope, cutting edge content where we cherry picked our best practices combined between what we did in our personal lives for our own healing journeys and what we've done in our clinical practice for over the past 15 years. With that, we combined it with a neuroplastic approach, meaning we created practices and exercises every step of the way and baked them into the program or wove them into the program so that not only are we feeding you content, but we're also supporting the restoration of your biological landscape, which is the fundamental, necessary, missing component when it comes to self-help and when it comes to any sort of healing journey. You could be seeing the best doctors in the world. You could be on the best medication. You can go to the best retreat centers. You could be drinking ayahuasca until you're blue in the face. But until you learn how to deactivate that fight or flight response, that sympathetic part of the nervous system, ultimately, all of the modalities that you employ and the practices that you do will not have the opportunity to integrate and will not give you the satisfaction of a long-term permanent effect. So in order to really get over that hurdle of self-help where you don't really need any more awareness about why you are the way you are, or maybe you've done everything under the sun to really bring about healing, but you still can't let go of these limiting beliefs, or you're still finding yourself in the same pattern or the same loop or these same types of dynamics with people over and over again. Despite the amount of effort that you've put forth to change it, it still continues to show up. And the reason for that is the fact that you most likely have a disrupted biological landscape. So part of what we do in Life Camp is help you with the restoration of the biology. Once we get that on board, again, through that 2-prong approach, all of the things that we can teach you can now become viable options, not only for learning, but also for integrating. And now you have actually set the stage where healing is actually not only possible, but the outcomes are long-term, if not permanent. So if you want to know more about Life Camp, I want you to reach out to me, DM me, or you can hit me in the links below. and we will talk. We can jump on a one-on-one call and I can tell you about it. I'm putting this video out there because we're actually starting our next round this Monday. And so for anybody who wants to get in, what is that, February 15th, let us know, because we have a couple spaces left. And so if you want to jump in, now is the time to do it this weekend. It is a high immersive living workshop, meaning it's high touch. So it's not one of those programs that you get into and everything's a recording and you just kind of cross your fingers and hope that you get through this alive. It is high touch support, meaning we have a live living workshop call on Mondays, and then we have 2 additional support calls on Wednesday and Friday. And those are our bonus support calls. The Monday call is a content where we go over the exercises and the homework for the week. And then the Wednesday and Friday call are optional bonus calls where you get to come on, get some one-on-one support in a group dynamic, and get feedback on your process. You also have access to us 24/7 through our exclusive Facebook group. So meaning that you have a question come up at any point throughout your process, we're there for you. Again, it is a high touch program in the sense that I know as a therapist and as a coach that if I were to offer a class 1 day a week on Monday, for example, and I don't see you till the next Monday, there's a whole lot of fucking days between that Monday and next Monday. And there's a very high likelihood of you disengaging and from you losing accountability. So we ensured that we wrapped that into the program, and we made it not only accessible for a lot of people to engage, but we did it in such a way where you felt supported every step of the way through accountability and through connection. And then the final piece that I'll add is, as a single mother who runs 2 businesses, I know that not everyone has 6 hours to carve out, a week or 10 hours a week for self-help. What we did with this program is that we made it very doable for even the busiest person, because we know that people want results and they want them now, and they want to start feeling better so they can start being in the world in the way that feels best to them. And they don't have extra time here and there to really carve out and sit on a mountain and meditate or, take off for 2 weeks to do a program or something like that. So what we did was we ensured that the exercises that we give you and the support that we offer is built into your already pre-existing lifestyle. So the exercises that you're going to do are really about consistency and doing it in increments versus carving out chunks of time throughout the week. This allows you to really implement some of the things that we're doing into a lifestyle or a schedule or a regimen that's already existing, which actually helps to support neuroplasticity, which is the reorientation of the brain and the growth of new neural networks. So we're really specific in our neuroplastic approach in how we support you and how we get the physiology on board. We're also invested in really positive outcomes. We're not attached to them, but we're certainly invested in them. So we know that with incremental exercises and with the proper support, people not only have dramatic shifts, but they have them very, very quickly. The beautiful part about being human is that we're incredibly adaptable, for better or for worse. And what that means is that not only is our brain malleable, but so is our ability to be in our environment. And so with proper and effective tools, connection, right? Healthy connection and support, the availability for healing and transformation is absolutely remarkable. And I can tell you that with the revolutionary breakthroughs around neuroscience, neuropsychology, and the concept of neuroplasticity, this is at the heart and soul of what I do. Because what that means is, ultimately, at the end of the day, regardless of what you've been through, no matter how fucked up your story is or how special you think you are based on, your adversity, everybody wants to be a special snowflake, and everybody wants to believe that they're more broken than the next. It's an unfortunate phenomenon that many of us experience. But what it does mean that is, regardless of your story and how much trauma you've been through, everyone has the accessibility for healing, and that in fact your brain is wired for healing. It's genetically predisposed inside of you to heal. So what that means is that anyone who comes to the table, who puts the work in, has an opportunity at overcoming anything and everything. And that is absolutely beautiful. I have worked with some of the most traumatized people on this planet, literally, and I have watched them make really, really remarkable changes in a very short amount of time by employing some really, really simple and effective practices.